The town of St Andrews is known for many things. Its university, which is the oldest university in Scotland, and ranked as one of the best in the whole of the UK, as well as being the place where the Prince and Princess of Wales attended. For those who follow golf, St Andrews is known as the home of golf, having the Royal and Ancient Golf Club of St Andrews, where much of the rules for golf were formulated, as well as being where the famous Old Course is, frequent home of the Open Championship. It is also known for its lovely beaches, one of which, the West Sands, was made famous by being featured in the start of the movie Chariots of Fire, when the young men were shown running along it. For me, the biggest attraction of St. Andrews is its ruined castle. To explain why this is such a special place, I have to tell you a wee bit of its history, and why, for example, it has an unusual tunnel running underneath it. The town of St. Andrews itself is named after the disciple Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, who, according to legend, was killed on an X shaped cross. On a side note, further legend says that an early Pictish king was praying for victory in battle when he saw a cloud formation in the shape of St. Andrew's cross, and took this as a sign of victory. The resulting flag, still used as the Scottish flag, is said to be the oldest continually used flag in all of Europe. But why was this little town in Scotland named after St. Andrew? Well, the legend is that some of Andrew's bones were brought to the area by a monk from Greece, known as Saint Rule. He deposited the bones in a little settlement that became known as St. Andrews. Fast forward a few centuries, and the little church that was created to house the bones became a cathedral. Though the cathedral now lies in ruins, what is left gives an indication that it was the largest church building built in Scotland. The head of the cathedral became increasingly more powerful within the Catholic Church, ultimately given the title of Archbishop and being very rich and powerful, so rich and powerful that he had a castle built near the cathedral. It is this castle that I particularly want to talk about, especially about the events leading up to the Scottish Reformation. In 1546, the Archbishop of St. Andrews at the time was David Beaton, who was disliked by many for his greed and, in their eyes, hypocritical lifestyle. Things came to a head when Beaton had the young, extremely popular Protestant preacher George Wishart captured and then burned to death just outside the castle grounds. For many, the death of Wishart was the last straw. Several of the local leaders disguised themselves as stonemasons who had come to repair part of the castle. They then overpowered the guards, broke into the archbishop's room where he was with his mistress, and then killed him and hung his body out of what was thought to be the window from which he had watched Wishart's death. The Protestants then sought to hold the castle in the hopes that reinforcements would come from England or elsewhere. They were successful in holding the castle for about a year, being joined from time to time by other Protestants, the most famous being John Knox, who would join them several months after the castle was taken, and who would serve as the minister for the church formed in the castle, called by some the First Protestant Church in Scotland. For me, the most interesting part of the castle is what is called the mine and the countermine. As the Queen of Scotland at the time, Mary, was very young, the country was ruled by a regent, James Hamilton, the Earl of Arran. His troops laid siege to the castle and began to dig a tunnel that is called a mine under the castle with the idea of weakening the castle walls so that they would collapse. The Protestants inside the castle could hear the chipping of stones and the digging, and so they attempted to dig a countermine in order to stop the attackers. After several false starts, the defenders were able to dig through to the mine and stop the attackers. One of the most noticeable things about the mine and the countermine is how uneven and hurried the countermine looks in comparison to the mine, as the defenders were rushing to stop the attackers, who had begun with a more methodical method. The castle would eventually fall, as the French Navy in support of Queen Mary sailed close to the castle and was able to bombard the defenders into submission. Knox and the others were taken as prisoners back to France. Knox would serve as a slave aboard a French galley for several years, but of course would return to Scotland as a leader of the Reformation. Today, St. Andrew's Castle is largely in ruins, but you can still make your way through much of the mine and countermine if you wish to. A word of warning though, it is often damp and slippery, and if you're tall like me, you will have quite a time getting through the countermine especially, as it is narrow and at no point of any great height. Still, if you're ever in the area, I would absolutely recommend a trip to see this fascinating bit of history. Until next time, goodbye.